Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video will be entitled Turnpikes, Canals, and Control. And of course I'm referring to the transportation system that was blueprinted, planned, and laid out after the establishment of the so-called 13 colony banking districts for the Bank of London and King George of England. King of England. Today we have King Charles. Isn't that a unfunny joke? King Charles. All right, so in the formation of the 13 colonies in respect of July 4th, the Dependence Day bank holiday that we celebrated 2 days ago, let me just explain a little bit about our transportation network, which is going to include the military satellite network known as the 5G smart grid. That's also part of the transportation of communication, surveillance, targeting, and weaponization. Yes, this is all part of a military plan, people, all funded by banks. The Bank of London initially, and the Rothschilds Company, investment firm of 4,200 private bankers doing what they won't say because it's private, meaning secret, meaning none of your business, meaning it's not a democracy. That's the world in which we live. So anyway, the way it all started out during the formation of the so-called colonies was through what we call the history of turnpikes and canals in the United States, which was never united, nor were there actually states. There were 13 colonies. Anyway, a turnpike, in case you don't know, it's a toll road. It's a road that's either private or public. And today, you can't tell if Amazon or Facebook or Google is private or public. They're military controlled, private bank funded weapon systems. Well, so were turnpikes. A toll road is a weapon system. The history of turnpikes and canals in the United States, I have to speak loud because I have a chemtrail scout plane directly over my head right now, because that's what I'm dealing with. I'm living in the here and now. You don't hear me talking about Robert Kennedy Jr. and his stupid wife Cheryl Hines and her PCR purveyor test. DNA collection. I'm dealing with planes over my head and helicopters. The history of turnpikes and canals in the United States began with work attempted and accomplished during the original 13 colonies, predicated upon the European technology of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire learned a lot about how they designed their roads, highways, and towns. Typically, a Roman centurion legion force could only walk 25 miles in a day, 40 kilometers. And so they would build towns about 40 clicks from each other, a day's walk for a Roman centurion legion. So this is an idea of a hub and spoke model. They set that up all throughout continental Europe, a hub and spoke model. And this is where they came up with the concept of where to position water sources and rest sites. And we did the exact same thing here in America. All right. After gaining its independence, after gaining a bank franchise from the Bank of London, the United States grew westward across the Appalachian Mountains, with the admission of new states, and then doubling the acreage of the America with the Louisiana Purchase from the French in 1803 from Napoleon, who's a Sardinian, by the way. No, what is he, Sardinian? No, Corsican. Emperor Napoleon was a Corsican. He was not French. He was a colony of France. Corsica was conquered by France. All right. The only means of transportation at this time, 1803, was between coastal states using the interlocked waterways by canoe or boat, for example, a keel boat or a flatboat or ship, or over land on foot, or by pack animal, mule or horse. Recognizing the success of the Roman roads in Europe that supported the empire, political and business leaders in the United States began to construct roads and channels and canals to connect up disparate parts of our nation. I can assure you that there are no private investors that are doing this. This is bank-funded construction projects to build out the infrastructure, the network, just like the internet. But first we had to go with dirt roads, waterway canals, and later railroads and interstate highways. Anyway, after the victory of the American Revolutionary War, which would have been around 1781, I believe, the United States took control of an area stretching across the Atlantic seaboard from New Hampshire to Georgia and as far inland to the Mississippi River, a major interstate waterway system. This encompassed an area that exceeded that of Western Europe at the time. While coastal trade was relatively new and it developed slowly, the nation possessed limited transportation and communication lines with the interior parts of our country. So port systems and portages were created slowly but surely across the new lands, across the Northwest Territory. The Congress of the Confederation set precedent with the Northwest Ordinance. Toll roads were constructed sometime between commercial centers, and they were owned by joint stock companies that sold their stock to raise construction capital. For example, the Lancaster Turnpike Company of Pennsylvania in 1795. Then in 1808, the Secretary of Treasury, Albert Gallatin, he wrote a report called The Subject of Public Roads and Canals, which suggested that the federal government should fund construction of an interstate toll road and canal system. Oh yeah, you betcha. All right, so I'm going to post a link here and you can read about our turnpike and canal initial foray into the West. All right, then this gave way eventually to the discovery of gold psychops, because I don't believe the discovery of gold happened in 1848 as originally advertised. I believe the discovery of gold happened before that, but it wasn't officially pronounced until the military was ready to accommodate mass migration of almost 1 million people into California. California is the place you ought to be, so you got to load up the truck and move to Beverly Hills, that is. Movie stars, swimming pools, but not yet. Okay, the railroads. The railroads really could never get any justification until you discover gold in California, which they rolled out in 1849 and even coined it the 49ers and named a steroid football team after the 49ers, even though gold was discovered officially the year before. And this is before the Olympic Club was established in San Francisco. But the Pacific Railway Act of 1862, July 1st, 1862, was the first official centralized funding by a bank using the government to pay to build the railroad by purchasing lands and laying the railroad tracks. All right, but meanwhile in California, we had the four horsemen of Alta California: Leland Stanford, Mark Hopkins, Charles Crocker, who later became Crocker Bank and Wells Fargo, Collis Huntington. In 1861, those four criminals founded a corporation known as the Central Pacific Railroad. They did this simultaneously because they had inside information that the federal government was going to fund, through the Pacific Railway Act, they were going to fund railroads. And of course, Collis Huntington, Leland Stanford, Mark Hopkins, Charles Crocker all wanted to get in on those lucrative contracts to build a railroad from San Francisco, from Sacramento, which is where the gold was discovered in Coloma. Coloma is close to Sacramento. So of course this would be where you would build your railroad depot, was where in close proximity where the fake gold was discovered. You do know gold was discovered at many other locations in California, but they chose Sacramento to be the primary hub in the spoke and hub model. They chose Sacramento. And there's Collis Huntington, Leland Stanford of Stanford University, Collis Huntington of Huntington Beach, and the Huntington Hotel in Pasadena. And then we have Mark Hopkins, who's known for the Mark Hopkins Hotel on Nob Hill, San Francisco, next door to the University Club and the Masonic Scottish Rites Auditorium, and Charles Crocker of Wells Fargo Bank. And that's in 1861, which was the year after the Olympic Club was founded, at the corner of Taylor Street and Post Street, San Francisco, next door to the St. Francis Hotel at Union Square. All right. Then 2 years later, I guess they didn't have enough money to steal, so we had the Pacific Railway Act of 1864 on July 2nd, 1864, to provide more money to fuel the wealth of Collis Huntington, Leland Stanford, Mark Hopkins, and Charles Crocker. And eventually we connected the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean vis-a-vis Sacramento to Yorktown, I believe, in Virginia. Isn't that where Cromwell surrendered his British troops to these pesky guerrilla warfare revolutionary forces of America? Anyway, that was the concept, to go from Virginia to Sacramento and then build off branches of the railroad from there. So in addition to turnpikes and canalways, we also created the railroads. And of course, Leland Stanford goes on to create Stanford University. Was called the Leland Stanford Junior University after he booted out the Native American Indians from the property. There's like 8,500 acres of land in Santa Clara County and San Mateo County, home to SRI, Stanford Research Institute, which is a military complex funded by the United States Navy and other military funders. The Linear Accelerator Program, funded by the Department of Energy on Sand Hill Road, across the street from the private bankers who fund many of the students who go to Stanford University or whose parents have provisional housing there, like Samuel Bankman Fried. His parents live on the Stanford campus. They receive provisional housing there. That is where Samuel Bankman Fried is awaiting his federal trial from banking that he received across the street on Sand Hill Road from Doug Leone and Sequoia Capital, a private bank for military tools like FTX, futures exchange, a way to weaponize and control the sources and uses of money, the money system. All happening right next door to Leland Stanford Junior University and Sequoia Capital, Eugene Kleiner and Kleiner Perkins, and George Roberts and Henry Kravitz, Barbarian at the Gate, and KKR, Jerome Kohlberg's company, where Erin Valente had her last meeting at 2500 Sand Hill Road before she disappeared, only to be found 5 days later dead as a doornail in the back of her rented Nissan Murano car with 5 tracking devices, and couldn't find it for 5 days. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is after we did the turnpikes and the dirt roads and the canal system, and after we finished the railroads, and after we connected up all of those port facilities, which are all under maritime law, which includes the railroads, which includes the interstates, we had Dwight Eisenhower re-upping the interstate highway funding, which had initially started in 1912, I believe. Dwight Eisenhower, National System of Interstate and Defense Highways. Key word there is defense. The interstate highway system, which connects the United States of America, is controlled by the military, and it was funded by the military. It's part of the national highway system, but don't make any bones about it. The actual bill includes defense, which is the code word for warfare. So we have a GPS tracked interstate system throughout the United States, courtesy of Dwight Eisenhower, who was the Allied Supreme Commander of World War II, if you want to believe the poppycock narrative about him. I think George Patton summed it up best, that Dwight Eisenhower was the best assistant he ever had. Or maybe that was Douglas MacArthur, because both Douglas MacArthur and George Patton had very low respect for Dwight Eisenhower, who had never really fired a weapon. He was a paper pusher, administrator. Anyway, he brought you the interstate highway system. He expanded it. It had already been underway, but he juiced it up because the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1921 was the precursor to the Dwight D. Eisenhower National System of Interstate Defense Highways, which came out in 1956, to be specific, 1956. Anyway, so I don't know exactly when the internet happened. I mean, I guess that would be in the 1950s when we started shooting rockets up and putting satellites up into orbit in the late 1950s, early 60s. Anyway, once you get enough communication satellites up in low Earth orbit, you can start connecting radio frequencies and promoting Hollywood in different ways. Instead of using theaters, you can use television and radio frequencies in a more robust manner. And that's what they've done. And so today we have an internet system of Wi-Fi, 5G, super-powered weaponry that can track you, that can listen to you, that can have a crypto dark web system that the military can communicate on and you don't have access to. Then they can surveil and spy on the public system that's open to anyone. They can direct energy into zip codes. They can put ringing into your ears. They can create cancer in your brain or in your organs. They can do all manner of things. GPS track you, create imagery, install ring cameras. They can do all of this. And they are. And they are. And it's all really part of the Turnpike and Canal control grid system. All right, that's my video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll post some links below. Enjoy, and we'll talk soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.